Welcome to the hand of God. I just did a different live stream. Here we go. Am I standing or sitting? I think I'll stand. I did a live stream over on Inquiry less than an hour ago. I got off. Thought I was gonna write some more, but instead I decided to do this one. I felt like I had something to say. I was trying to figure out exactly what it was, and now here it is. Anyway, once again, CHIMAOGE here. Let me take off my hoodie. Forgive me, I'm so tired. Forgive me, I'm so tired. Anyway, for those of you who don't know, my name is CHIMAOGE, government name CHIMAOGE Chijioke Ibe, alternate white structured name CHIMAOGE Chijioke Ibenwuku. Why does the second one exist? Basically, Lord. I always think I could find a simple explanation. It's not. Essentially, at some point, people in my patrilineage were using the last name Ibenwuku, which is a combination of my paternal great-grandfather's name, at least a name applied to him, and my paternal great-great-grandfather's name. That's Ibe and Nwoko, respectively. Then at some point, someone shortened the last name from Ibenwuku to Ibe, and that became my government name because that was the name that my biological father was using in the U.S. Before I was born. So those are two different things. It's just apparently a lot of people in the village that my patrilineage is in as a reference point. I'll just say it like that. Orji Urata, O-R-J-I-U, and that's the name of the village. Then the other sector, Urata, U-R-A-T-T-A. Okay, that's in West Africa, right? It's in what most people call Nigeria now. Why do I say it like that? I do not like to acknowledge sacrilegious borders. Someone just drew lines on a map and then started deleting people and said this is Nigeria. Anyway, the whole point is those are ways to look me up. I've registered a viewer. Thank you very much. Every view is a blessing. Yes, and I haven't had a comment yet, but every comment is a blessing as well. I read comments at my discretion. Anyway, government name CHIMAOGE Chijioke Ibenwuku. Last name is spelled I-B-E. Alternate white structured name CHIMAOGE Chijioke or what did I say? Well, I'm tired. Government name CHIMAOGE Chijioke Ibe. That last name is spelled I-B-E. I might have said that before. I'm tired. Forgive me. Alternate white structured name CHIMAOGE Chijioke Ibenwuku. That other last name is I-B-E and then N-W-U-K-U. If you notice, the name of my media company is OziIbenwuku. O-Z-I, then Ibenwuku. What does O-Z mean? It means message. So that is the name of my media company, okay? Yes, I operate my media company myself. Think of it like I'm Superman and I'm operating, a restaurant chain by myself. I'm flying all over the place. That's what I do. Anyway, let me put up a short. The point is, this media company has the flagship network, OziIbenwuku. You can check that out here on YouTube and everywhere else. And then 5 other networks. They're each devoted to different things. I'm fine-tuning how I explain each network and also what I do on each network, but I have the basic structure. The point is I don't want to put all my content in one place. That would be confusing to the viewers. And then also for my own inner life, it's helpful if I go different places when I want to post different content. So that's a 2-in-1. This network you're on now, CHIMAOGE's Comments, among other things, is where I come to further explain things I've said before. The deepest place I do that here is this segment now, The Hand of God. And I just saw the number 444. That means I'm hearing my ancestors clearly. It also means I can make a wish. What's the wish I make? I wish that we all eat. Span forever. More information about me. My matrilineal village is Ebem, EBM. That's the village, and then the area. I mean, I guess people debate exactly what to call these things. The area it's a part of, I would say it's an uzo, like a way. Zohafia, Ohafia. Okay. Now, my family is garbage. My family is garbage. I want to say more about my family, but they're garbage, so I'm holding back because a lot of them tried to delete my life. Because of that, I don't want to mention all of them. I will in the future, and I'll talk even more about what they've done, but I've already talked about it. You can check out my video, My Family Abused and Abandoned Me. That's the first time I talked about my family in any sort of depth. Then if you check out my personal network, No Way, which is a subset of this network, there are emergency messages where I've talked about my family situation, and then also in my live streams I've talked about some of them, and I'll do more in the future. Kabruno Nogo Ha. Indeed, Nanananam Kabiko. Expand forever. What does Ka mean? Means greeting, also expand, also overcoming. In my matrilineal village, Ebon, and I think all of Ohafia, Ka is used as a greeting. At least, well, let me just say Ka is used as a greeting. The only reason I hesitate is because a lot of people watch TV and like to speak English, so maybe now they say hi. I don't know. Stupidity. Anyway, the point is that that's a greeting historically, and now it's still in use. Anyway, Ka, greeting, expand forever. Just called in my deceased relatives as well as my deceased ancestors outside of my family, because you have ancestors that are outside of your family as well, of course. It's sad when the living are much worse than the deceased. But anyway, that is the state of my family. Whatever. We will reincarnate. Don't worry. I'll complete my life journey. It's just some of you have to go into the Ajafia and probably leave my gene pool. Anyway, let's get on to the topic today. Alright, I wasn't even finished. So my matrilineal village, my patrilineage now, as a reference point, and I'll just say it like this, resides in the village of Algi Urata that I mentioned before. And then I myself was born in what is now called Washington, D.C., in the United States of America. Why am I saying it like that? Again, people drew lines on maps, started deleting people, they went against nature. I don't like to acknowledge sacrilegious borders, but again, I want you guys to know what I'm talking about. According to prayer, there are different sectors in the world today that are natural. We just can't see them because the world is broken. You can call them obodo in my language, okay? That word is commonly used to refer to countries, villages, cities. People kind of debate what the demarcations are. I think it just means sector. There are different sectors in the world. Apparently where I was born is in a sector that can be called ROM, ROM. What does that mean? Apparently that means the sector of Oshun, because she oversees the sector. Again, I don't think you're a bad person if, you don't immediately accept that, because that just came out of the air. But hey, Washington, D.C. came out of an oppressor's pen, so I don't like that one. Anyway, I'm not going to signify negatively on where I was born. Where you're born is sacred to you. Anyway, so where I was born is sacred to me. Where my lineage was born is also sacred to me. That's the double whammy. Where do I live now? I live now in the Oshun of the universe. Because yes, each of the things that undersea existence, Oshun is one. She's the second biggest one. The only one bigger than her is the god of thunder, who is the love of her life, who she upholds. She manifests as an area of the earth, and I'm in it. What do we call it now? I mean, here we go. It's bigger than just this, but I'm in the part that they call Atlanta, Georgia. I like Atlanta. I live in Atlanta. How did I come to live in Atlanta? Again, my family is garbage. What happened? I have a stupid little sister. She is a predator. I did not know she was a predator at the time in 2021, but she was stupid. She had an injury and an illness. What did she decide to do when she had an injury and illness? She decided to move from the Washington, D.C. area to Atlanta, Georgia. The illness was so bad she could not walk consistently, but she could walk enough to get on a plane. Therefore, it was a problem. What happened? My biological father, who's a deadbeat, and yes, a deadbeat can be near you your whole life, but if it's doing negative things the whole time, it's a deadbeat. The deadbeat suggested that I move to Atlanta with my sister. Did not want to do that because I had my own issues I was dealing with. No, they were not my fault. I was ill through no fault of my own, okay? But my illness had a different nature than her illness. Therefore, I was of use in an emergency. She was of no use in an emergency. Why? Because at any moment, she could lose her ability to walk. Also, she did not know anyone in the Atlanta area. So, I looked at things, and after a while, I said, you know what? I think I should just go ahead and move to be backup for this person so that they do not lose their life through stupidity. I moved to Atlanta. My family didn't support me. They also did not properly discuss that situation at all. So there was no common discussion, and no one let her know that was a bad idea, even though that should be obvious. And I was not supported. At the time I moved, that was 2021. I was 23 years old. That was kind of at least right on the heels of a global health emergency. In many places, they were still in the midst of it. DC area, that impacted us greatly. We couldn't even move. I also had my own illnesses, long-term illnesses I was dealing with. And I just graduated from college. I graduated from Harvard University. I went there from 2016 to 2020. That was a grueling experience. I come out of that, no support. Further context, my deadbeat dad was at least 38 when I was born. He was not rich at the time. Or if he was rich, he was not moving like he was rich because he said he had 4 jobs. He was running all over the place. That's not a rich man, okay? He was telling stories like he's driving up the mountain and rocks were falling just to make some money and things of that nature. That's not a rich man's move, okay? And for further context, no one else who is closely related to him, and I'll just say it like that to be simple because the family doesn't organize itself well. No one else who's closely related to him is rich, and they certainly didn't get there in, a reasonable amount of time. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't have enough money to help me in emergency, which I mentioned before, but again, these are not rich people, okay? At the same time, he somehow expected me to be rich in my early 20s. He told me when I was 21 and not yet out of college that he would not pay for graduate school. Then after I got out of college, he told me that I should be rich. Doesn't make any sense. What am I saying here? No financial support from a man who, by the time I was old enough to remember, was rich, okay? He's a doctor, according to my mother, making $200,000 to $300,000 a year, been doing so for quite some time. Why am I giving you all this background? I was left in a very bad spot by people who could have helped me. That's the context of my moving to Atlanta, Georgia. Now, I ended up liking Atlanta, Georgia, okay? I like the feel of the city. I like the nature here. I see a lot of potential here. It's just the place you're in is not everything. You have to know good people. Okay. Part of the reason you should know good people, and the reason I'm telling this story, is so that you can avoid being the victims of crime. Okay. There are many ways that crime can manifest, but crime hurts you most if you're vulnerable and isolated. More context. Because of how I grew up, I did not have many connections in Maryland. Because I specifically lived in Maryland in the DC area. I lived in Prince George's County. If you know the city of Bowie, Maryland, I lived right outside of Bowie, Maryland. Okay. For context, all the elementary and middle schools I went to 2 were very small. I think the largest class I had was 28 people. The middle school I went to was an hour away from the neighborhood I lived in, so it's hard to connect with people. Also, my parents did not let me hang out with other people outside of school. Hard to connect. High school, all boys school, mostly white. I'm obviously not white. Less than 500 students total. Not a good environment to get to know people. I go to college. Again, I made connections in college, but that is still a minority of the people there. Again, Harvard is just a very rough environment, not a good social environment. And then after college, as is the case for many people, people move to various different places. So by the time I'm back in Maryland, because I returned there at the end of college, because we were told to leave campus in about March due to the global health emergency. Again, not many people in my area. And then my family is a mess. So when I moved to Atlanta, I really did not put social connection in high consideration just because I didn't have many. Then by the time I'm in Atlanta, again, I'm tired of moving because, again, we have to make clear things like college end up feeding a lot of criminality because people think nothing of moving large distances. And I don't blame the students, I blame their families, okay? And then there's this other problem where people's families suffocate them, so people are reluctant to go to college 10 minutes away, right? So there are dual problems there. Nonetheless, generally speaking, moving long distances away is worse. And I will say a lot of families want their child to move long distances away so they can continue doing bad things without the child's oversight. Because we have to look at things spiritually. A lot of children are born to police the crime in their lineage. Okay, naturally, I'm a policeman. My lineage is full of crime, and I'm announcing it here. I was born to take down a lot of my elders. Yes, they're just criminals. There are different kinds of crime. There is crime that goes against nature. That's the worst one. Crime that goes against morality. That's basically the same one. It's just, technically speaking, if you're looking into other realms of existence, there are crimes that go against morality that don't go against nature. That's just a weird other clause. And then there's crimes that go against the laws of human government. Okay. Now, obviously, the laws of human government should line up very well with the first two. But when there's no justice, they don't line up. In the world today, they don't really line up. A lot of governments criminalize things that should not be criminalized. And at the same time, they let go things that should not be let go. And then their punishments, generally speaking, are not just. The most common punishment for a crime right now is sending people to what is known as prison. What is that? In the world today, that is a box. They put you in a box to be tortured and call that justice. That is not justice. If you torture an evil person, more likely than not, they will come out more evil, either towards their outward behavior or their inward behavior. Because yes, we have to care about how people treat themselves. Now, why am I getting into all of this? The title of today's live stream, this Hand of God segment, and again, the Hand of God is where I come to explain things I've said before, is that crime makes romantic relationships more unstable. I've made this claim many times. I'm reiterating it here. Romantic relationships are our deepest relationships, and therefore, they're what is known as the Ada, the first daughter of all relationships. Okay. The Ada is the center of the gravitational pull of a universe. An example of this, because the Ada, the first daughter, and I want to be clear, that term is very deep. I've referred to myself using the term Ada before. Why? Because there's situations where the first daughter can be a man, okay? Or partner can be Ada, all right? Gender is not simple, especially when you're looking at things like positions. Anyway, and that's not to say that people don't know their gender, but it just like when you're looking at things philosophically, this is not 1950s Fox News nonsense. Anyway, the whole point is this. An example of the Ada is the center of the earth. That is the center of the gravitational pull of this earth. That is the Ada. Okay. So, let's look at relationships. If the Ada falls, everything falls. So when romantic relationships fall, all other types of relationships fall. Your relationships with your algar, Your in-laws, for lack of a better clean term, fall. Your relationships with your family fall, and then any other work relationships you have will fall as well. And I just want to say this. A lot of times people do not label relationships properly in the world today, and I'm just going to leave that there. Anyway, we live in a world where there is all sorts of crime. The crime that sits everything down is that of violating people. Okay. Violation is the nexus of crime. What does that mean? It ties all crime together. And that is the crime that happens in the romantic space. Because that means that a romantic interaction was initiated somehow. Now, it could have been that a romantic interaction was initiated consensually and then someone decided to violate, or maybe the violation itself just exploded out of nowhere. Now, the violation itself is what is known as an evil romantic act, okay? So, what does that do? That poisons the entire romantic space. As soon as that exists in the world, romantic relationships are destabilized. Then, if you look at the nature of that crime, a person is being held for at least a second against their will. When that crime is allowed to explode, and when is it accepted, any crime is possible. That destroys the will of the people and emboldens criminals in general. And from there, the worst crime of all, deletion of life, the unjust deletion of life is possible and will explode, and everything else can exist. Why am I saying all this? As soon as this exists, romantic relationships are destabilized. But I want to emphasize this also. It is not easy for this to happen. The world is set up so that there should be no crime. In the world today, we have a crime epidemic. People cannot even walk down the street without fear of being the victim of crime. So in that context, we should not be surprised that people are dissatisfied with their romantic relationships. I talked yesterday, and I've talked in a previous live stream, about how individual mindsets make this worse, but that is not the primary cause of the romantic relationship crisis. And again, I just saw the number 2222. That's 1111 twice. Let's make 2 wishes. First, let's get rid of crime in this world. And second, let us fix romantic relationships in this world. Expand forever. Now, these crimes have to be gotten rid of in order to fix the romantic relationship crisis. Obviously, we want to fix other things as well. We want people to live longer, things of that nature. But we have to be clear. These crimes feed other things that we don't normally call crimes. Things like disease. Metaphysically, that is a crime. Why? That means that some other life form is attacking you in this world. That should not happen. Or you're breaking down due to other attacks. Okay. That should not be happening. That is itself a crime. And I'm going to leave it at that. Now, let me further tie in what I was talking about with my own situation. I'm using it as an example, and yes, I'm also signifying on my family. I'm angry at you people. So, one problem in my family is poor romantic relationships. Now, I don't know everything about my other family members' romantic relationships because I'm not Jesus. I'm not committing acts of war in my bloodline. Okay. And I'm just going to leave it at that. At the same time, I've seen too much. And also, I've seen too much evidence that nothing is happening. There are many people in my family who are old enough to have conceived me, who have no spouse. That should not be happening. And when I say my family, I'm talking about everyone related to me. I see this all over. There are many other people who are constantly getting in fights. And I hear about them. I hear about the fights. And then there is no proper investigation. People arbitrarily take sides. And then, in my case, I was the victim of a violation by my younger sister. To be clear, that individual is younger than me, but they're an adult. There's a lot of stereotypes out there. Now, I'm not able to fully conclude my investigation on the criminals in my family, but I can make inferences. I think it's possible that some of them believe that because that individual is younger than me, it's impossible they could commit a crime against me. Curiously, these people are also proponents of the idea that the elder could do no wrong. Yet, even though I'm my younger sister's elder, I did wrong. Anyway, weird twisted mindset like Jesus. Okay, Jesus is rejected by his brothers and sisters, and he has no wife, at least none that will claim him in public. Anyway, remember, Jesus and God are the same person. So, what am I saying here? This destabilization in the romantic area means that so many of my elders, right, and other people as well, are not grounded in this world, because relationships are what ground you in this world. Because of that, they're not in a healthy state. Then on top of that, they clearly have not done the proper inner work to be proper people to hold on to this. And I think that dovetails with the poor state of romantic relationships in my family. Then on top of that, these people do not have many non-romantic connections. And I'm saying this because I've seen very few evidence that these people have friends. I want to use my biological father, Anthony Ibe, as the primary example. He's many times said that he has no friends. And he's told me that it is not important to have friends. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So this means two things. One, they're not in a good position to set me up with other connections to back me up. And two, they themselves do not interact with enough people to get rid of the craziness in their head. Any isolated person can have craziness in their head. Okay. Now, it's possible for an isolated person to do enough work to compensate for that, but that's extra work, and these people have not done that. So what am I saying? In my situation where I was a victim of crime, I was already in a weak position due to being set up badly by my elders, and I also had a physical illness. Okay, then I did not know many people, and then I had an emergency, and I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Either I don't move from the DC area and then have my younger sister get in a serious situation, which would affect us all. And I want to emphasize, even if a family member of yours is evil, if they are harmed, you are one. And again, this is both on a spiritual level and a physical level. Because think about it. If someone in your family undergoes an emergency, at the very least, you have to do work to compensate for that. And then there is the spiritual level on which you be injured. So there's that. So I don't move, that happens. Or I move and I'm in the unknown. I just looked at it and I thought, you know what? I think the first scenario would go worse. I took a chance on that. Now, for the period I was near that individual, you know, the worst did not befall them. But after they attacked me and various other things happened, I said, you know what? I'm not Jesus. I have to save myself. Because there's a culture of being extreme with the family. Either you don't engage with it at all, or you engage with it too much. Jesus engages with his family too much. Like with everything, you have to be in the middle. Me etiti, me ama, be good. Don't be too extreme. So what am I saying in my example? That is a micro example of how the romantic relationship crisis set me up to be a victim of crime. And I've not been properly healed from that. Now let's zoom out. Many people in the world today are victims of crime at the hands of their family and outside, because they are isolated and also put in bad positions. And there's two types of isolation. There's the isolation where you don't know anyone or you don't see anyone. And there's the isolation where you see a lot of people, but they're all bad. And that's possible. I want to talk about the second type of isolation, because the first one is easy to understand. In the second type of isolation, the person can find themselves in a cult. This cult is, of course, a negative thought system that has overtaken a group. If you're interacting with that group, all you're hearing are bad ideas about yourself and bad ideas about the people harming you. In that environment, it can be hard to know what the truth is. If the person in that situation was set up badly to begin with, they might not have enough foresight to leave those people. And a big reason they don't have enough foresight to leave those people is because they think that being isolated when you're not seeing anyone is fundamentally different than being isolated where you only see bad people. If you're the victim, a bad person is not a person. They're just an idea destroying you. And that's the end of my comments. But I want to wrap it up by saying this. Crime touches everything, but in the sphere of romantic relationships, and consequently relationships in general, we see it at its most violent. We cannot get rid of crime and fix relationships if we do not recognize how it's operating in that space. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Let me take a break, and then I'll reiterate the main points of that. I don't know if I'll say literally everything, but I hope that was helpful. Anyway, let me take a break. Oh, one other piece of context. I mentioned that my dad was at least 38 when I was born. I'm his oldest child, anyway. And then also to add more context, I'm the oldest grandchild of his parents, so I don't have any older cousins from that thread of connection. I have older cousins through my matrilineage, but again, I either don't know them or the ones I know are just not proper anyway, because they fall into the categories I was describing. Thank you. Just taking a break here, and then I'll give, well, let me just say, I'll say what I said again. I'll just try and be more concise. Just saw the number 3333. That's the number 1111 3 times. Let me just make three wishes, the speedy way. Almoza and Katie Kenga. May everything we wished for happen again 3 times over. Expand forever. All right, let me get into it. Let me speak again. Welcome, welcome. This is the hand of God where I reiterate points that I have made before. Now, what am I going to do? I'm going to further explain how crime makes romantic relationships more unstable. I'm going to give the overall idea of that. And then here we go. What shall I add? Crime makes romantic relationships more unstable. That's the overall idea. I'm thinking of how to say it even better this time. Crime makes romantic relationships more unstable. Then I want to use my family situation as an example. Thinking here. Yes. I think I'm gonna, in order to make it, in order to make my remarks even clearer this time, I'm gonna add on a little phrase. Crime makes romantic relationships more unstable in order to allow itself to propagate. Okay, and let me go. Crime makes romantic relationships more unstable, and in turn that allows itself to propagate. I will use my own situation as an example. Now, how does crime make romantic relationships more unstable? To be clear, I'm not just talking about crime that goes against the laws of government. I'm most specifically talking about crimes against nature and crimes against morality. Laws of governments today are not proper. They suggest evil punishments, they let evil things go, and they criminalize things that should not be criminalized. They're a mess. They're themselves a crime and they fit into crime. What does that mean? We're not able to fully execute justice because we need leadership groups, which is what governments are a subset of, to fully mediate justice. Now, crime has exploded into this world due to historical reasons. There have been historical negative events. This is not natural. But again, nature can be overcome. It can be overcome in a good way, but more than likely it can be overcome in a bad way. Because nature is himself good. Nature is a person. Nature is koala, the echo of the land. Yes, that animal, the koala, is nature manifested as an animal. What am I saying there? In this world, we should not be obsessed with overcoming nature. Because if you overcome nature, usually you fall. We've fallen away from nature. Because of these crimes against nature, the most sacred act of nature, romantic relationships, are broken. The nexus of crime, violation, involves the most foul crime in a purely romantic act. And then because of the nature of that crime, it allows for all of the crimes to occur. That crime must be eliminated in order for the others to be fully eliminated, so no crime is allowed. Now, once romantic relationships are destabilized because crime is everywhere, people do not make proper connections. And when people do not make proper connections, they're not able to propagate themselves well. And then when people are born into this world, they are set up badly. When lineages are full of crime, good people are born into those lineages to reverse the trend. These people are then targeted by their lineage members. That's both the members of their tribe and, worse yet, the members of their family. Because we have to be realistic. Basically, everyone on earth today is related to a criminal because crime is so prevalent. In order to root out crime, we must begin with our own families. There are two ways to do this. One, within the bounds of morality and the law, targeting our family members who are criminals in order to stop their crime and hopefully get them reformed, but we must protect ourselves first. And then two, removing ourselves from their presence. Because at the end of the day, if you're a victim of crime, you can't help. let me use my own situation as example. This is an example of how the general world problem of romantic relations being broken led to my family being in a bad place, and then it allowed criminal mentality to further victimize me. Before I was born, from what I can tell, my family was not in a good state. And let me get more specific. Let me look at my four, what I'll call, how should I call them? I'll call them spine lineages. My patrilineage, my matrilineage, my biological father's matrilineage, and my mother's patrilineage. I'm going to start by absolving my mother's patrilineage because I don't know them. This is the fault of, I will say, primarily my mother. Why? She did not, when I was born at least, or at least when I can remember, contact her biological father. I don't know specifically what happened between them, but from what she has told me, she knows other people in the lineage. She could at least find them. She should have maintained some connection with them, or at the very least, given me information about them so I can navigate. At this moment, it is possible that I see a relative of my grandfather, or even my grandfather himself on the street, and will not know who they are. That's not proper. So that is a resource that is unavailable to me. That is a crime. Now, let's look at my patrilineage. Now, I want to start by saying this. I met my grandfather, my biological father's father, as a toddler, and I met him a couple times as a small child. I have fond memories of him. I have a fond feeling about him. But he passed away when I was 9 years old. And I will say this, the information that I've been given about him from the living is not comprehensive. I'll just say I have a good feeling about him, and I'll leave it at that. Now, he had 6 children. And I'm just going to go out and say this. Not a single one of them is in good standing with me, and I'll leave it at that. Now, what am I saying here? I do not have a comprehensive history of my patrilineage. What my biological father, who should have been my primary point person on these matters, has told me about this is not comprehensive. All I can tell is that stuff that has affected the entire world has affected them. Big piece of evidence of this is the changing of the, I guess I'll call it last name. First of all, last names are not natural. And then in the region of West Africa where my family lives, or at least settled as a reference point, I'll just say it like that, patrilineal now. That was not common practice before the invasion of colonial powers. And then it was shortened from Ibenwuku to Ibe because it's easier for westernized people to pronounce. Not good. Anyway, that's it. But what am I saying here? By the time I was alive, I didn't have comprehensive contact with my patrilineage. All I knew was my biological father and his siblings, and they ended up fighting among themselves. So this ended up not being a good contact for me. And one thing I've noticed, and again, forgive me if there's some mitigating information that makes this a little harsh, but if you don't give me information, I have the right to be harsh, and I've seen a lot that can support this. From what I've seen of my dad and his other 5 siblings, not a single person has a really healthy romantic relationship. And on top of that, not a single person has comprehensively healthy relationships in general. What does this mean? They were not in good states themselves, and they were not in a good state to put me in contact with people. And I could say not a single one of them has given me good contacts. That was bad. Now, on to my, I'll just talk about my dad's matrilineage. In my language, my abrunena. Okay. From what I've seen, that thing is a mess, and I'll leave it at that. Nothing good from there. Similar problems there. Then let me focus on my matrilineage. And I want to emphasize, all of my lineages are important, but like 90% of the people on this earth I am matrilineal, as in that is the lineage from which I receive most of my being. Okay. What does that mean? This is my primary concern. And I'll leave it at that. Be intelligent. Your primary concern is not your only concern. You see, my matrilineage right now is refuse. Why do I say that? The worst story I've heard of my matrilineage is that there are different wings of my matrilineage who have deleted each other from life. Again, my matrilineage from the village of VENMO. Apparently, this deletion of life is centered around politics, and I'll leave it at that. To delete your family member from life due to politics is the highest abomination. And on top of that, it seems that culture has developed of saying we're no longer blood relatives because of crime. Crime does not take away blood relation. It just makes it harder to unite. But if you deny the basic truth of blood relation, the criminality will spread. Now, that doesn't mean you should be near someone who has committed a crime against you, but you must acknowledge the truth. And you must also acknowledge this. Within the family, people operate as individuals. And this is leading me into my second point. Just because your mother and your brother's mother, two sisters, are fighting, doesn't mean you and your brother should not fesaka. That does not mean that you and your brother should not dap up. But in my matrilineage, a culture has developed, I can see, of dividing people based upon the feelings of their parents. This is tu fia kui hen. What does this mean? I could not even make proper connections within my matrilineage. And I'll say this. All the relationship problems I've talked about in relation to the world in general, and specifically my family, exist in that matrilineage. And I want to also say this. I mentioned Jesus before. Acts of war commensurate to Jesus. And I want to be clear. Jesus is worshipped now. But that's a distorted image of him. This is from the ancestors. The true Jesus lives in Ewu, in the random, in HE double hockey sticks. He's the same person as Satan. And he is centered around committing acts of war within his lineage. He's going for the three-eyed baby. The three-eyed baby exists in my matrilineage. I've mentioned it before, and I'll leave it at that. I don't want to overload my viewers with trauma. So we have the three-eyed baby right there. And the nature of the three-eyed baby was not talked about properly to me. When that kind of abomination exists within your lineage, especially if you're the first son of your mother, you should be given a full and truthful rundown of that as an adult. I was not. I still need to investigate. What am I saying here? When the other member of what I'll call my sibling group, because I'm not a fan of the concept of cousins, okay? Those are also your siblings. But you have your innermost sibling group. And again, you're not supposed to be obsessed with it, but it's something. And I want to say this. I wish I had more than one other innermost sibling. Okay. But again, improper relationships. Things didn't happen. When the other member of my innermost sibling group, the one other person who was given birth to by my mother, decided to move in a reckless manner, and my elders did not convene. And all that happened is that my biological father, who I'll say is a lineage invader, and I don't like getting into this, but when romantic relationships are... Forgive me, I received a phone call. Yes, I'm still up, don't worry. I just received a phone call. Anyway, we still have liftoff. What am I saying? Kabrunam no go. When that destructive action was taken, and all that happened is my biological father, who's a lineage invader. Why do I say that? Because he hates my matrilineage. Okay. I've talked about this before. I'll just give one piece of evidence. He does not like the dialect of people from Ohio. So much so I was discouraged to speak it in my house. Anyway, that lineage invader was the only one who spoke on it to me and said that I should move and become the only one covering the situation. Because again, when romantic relationships break down, you can't understand the family. Okay. Because you can't understand your secondary relationship if your primary relationships aren't happening. Our family relationships are secondary, but guess what? Secondary, kalakanu, that's big. Okay, when I'm supposed to be the only one covering that situation by suggestion, they've basically destroyed my life. So I was left between a rock and a hard place. No one in the matrilineage had anything to say. If they had anything to say, I didn't hear it, therefore it doesn't count. Because there's also this culture of thinking that someone is a child forever. And because people are said to be children forever, people do not reproduce in that matrilineage. And then we have the three-eyed baby. Now, what happened to me? I was dealing with my own issues through no fault of my own. I'd gone through a grueling college period. I also had long-term illnesses. I was trying to figure out the cause of the illness. Not every illness is simple to figure out. I was being told that, my illness was not serious by people who were not in a position to know. And I want to say this. I think some of them think that because my biological father is a doctor, he could know whether or not I was ill properly. Under the auspices of Western medicine, you are not allowed to formally examine and diagnose a blood relative. My dad could not be my doctor, and he never examined me. On top of that, he's a primary care doctor. He's not a specialist. He could not by himself be a full medical team to examine me. To fiakwa. So, I'm dealing with these issues. And then I'm also trying to navigate my lack of social connection through no fault of my own. And then I'm expected to by myself decide what to do about the reckless action. Because I want to make it clear, moving is not necessarily bad. But if someone is in a bad position physically and they don't know anyone who will support them in the location that they could move to, they should not move. And I'll just keep it at that. Now, I was in this bad position. I ended up moving because I decided that not going with that suggestion and allowing someone in my lineage to be isolated was worse than the alternative. Again, that member decided to harm me. That harm was so bad that, well, let me say this. There were many instances of disrespect and they escalated. Then Jesus emerged. When Jesus emerged, it was so bad I couldn't speak about it. My plan was, let me get enough money to live on my own. Because I also want to make it clear, my family members conspired to keep me in a Jesus situation. I did not want to live under the same roof as my sister, but they conspired to keep me in that situation. I wanted to move out. I was not able to move out. And then Jesus returned. When Jesus returned, I pushed through pain to tell my family members what happened, and they left me to perish. And then the lineage invader orchestrated an attack against me. Anyway, I've talked about the rest. The point is I'm still dealing with the effects of this, but what is the lesson here? The general worldwide romantic relationship crisis harmed everyone in society. It harmed my family as well. Other things occurred in my family to make it worse. At least some of that was individual people's irresponsibility and incompetence. Jesus emerged in my matrilineage and we had the three-eyed baby. And then, well, once that happened, I was born. But because of the vulnerable position of my lineage, I was put in a vulnerable position. An individual act was again tapped into that. And then I was vulnerable to the return of Jesus, and that happened. And after the return of Jesus, we had his father, Ele Biera. Ele came from the lineage invader. Ele attacked me, and it was only through the strength of my own self and my ancestors that I survived the attack of Ele. What am I saying here? That is just one example of how the romantic relationship crisis can manifest in Ele coming into an individual's life. And when Ele comes, you just have to be like Jupiter and go. Let me leave you with this. Do not think that as long as this romantic relationship crisis exists in this world, you will be safe. Because the cause of the crisis will propagate the crisis in order to explode again. Crime came into the world, destabilized our connection, and amidst that weeping and gnashing of teeth, explodes again and again. It explodes in the lives of individuals and rises up to create a collective disconnection, a collective Mars, a collective marring. What am I saying here? We must fix the global romantic relationship, both for ourselves and the world in general. And in order to do that, we must acknowledge that it is not happening at first and primarily due to individual decision. It is due to systemic crime. But when that happens, Jesus can emerge and make his third eye-opening decision. Let us nip that in the bud. Thank you very much. I hope this has been helpful. I'll come back again to reiterate these points. See you next time.